Welcome, and in this lesson, we're going to learn how to create, delete, copy, and move files and directories. Now, first, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look again at our touch command. First, our touch command is really useful. What it's used for is changing a file timestamps. I can pass it a few flags like changing the last access time on a specific file. So I can essentially touch a file on the system to update information. I can change the last modification time. One thing I can do with this, and that you notice throughout the course that I like to do, is I can create files with it. Touch file 1, touch file 2, touch file 3. Now, if you're noticing here, I'm also using these squiggly brackets. Squiggly brackets allow me to pass in multiple parameters to be passed into the touch command. So it's going to create each independent file here. So if I hit enter, I now have multiple files. Now I can also do that with the make directory command. I can do make dir, dir1, dir2, dir3, and close our squiggly brackets, and you'll notice that we now have 3 directories. Well, I'm not satisfied with the name of directory 1. I need to rename it. How do we rename files on Linux? Well, we rename files by moving them, believe it or not. So if I want to rename directory 1, I do an mv on dir1, and I'll name it new dir. I'll do an ls, and we see that we have a directory name of new dir. So let's say I want to create a directory that's really kind of threaded. It has multiple layers and multiple parents. I want to create a directory inside of the new dir directory. Then I'm going to name that dir1, and then inside of dir1 I want to create dir2, and inside of dir2 I want to create dir3. If I hit enter, it's not going to work. The reason it's not going to work is because I don't have dir1 created inside of my new directory. dir2 is not created, so of course it can't create dir3 if the preceding parents are not created. So how can I go ahead and create all of the ones that don't exist if we're specifying it? So if I'm specifying create dir3, I want to create dir2 and dir1 if they do not exist. So real quick, let's take a look at our man make dir directory. If you notice here, we have -p. No error if existing make parent directories is needed. So let's go back up to our command, do a make dir -p, and then head into our new dir directory, and we'll see that we have dir1. cd dir1, there's dir2. cd dir2, there's dir3. Now let's see if we have our tree command installed. Tree command's not installed. I find this a useful utility. I'm going to go ahead and do a yum install tree. Now, if you type the tree command, what you'll see is our directory structure and tree outline. So if we're inside of new dir, you'll see that it created dir1, dir2, and dir3. If we're inside of the parent directory, you'll see all the directories associated with it, and then the trees falling out behind it. Again, I find that useful for visual context to kind of see where the directory layers are and what are parent directories on my system. But to create parent directories in existence, I can just pass the -p flag or option, whatever you're calling it. So I now have all of these directories. I need to go ahead and just remove everything from our system that's inside of this directory, inside of our current working directory, which is currently /root for me. To do that, I'm going to do an rm-rf*. That means everything. If I were to do file*, it would remove everything that starts with file. But in this case, I want to remove everything. And you'll notice that our directories and files are gone. Now I can make a new directory by saying make dir dir1, but I can also remove a directory by doing rm-dir dir1. Now the kicker about remove directory is it doesn't remove recursively. So if we were to remake our directory again, go inside of our directory and create some files, touch file 1, file 2, file 3, and then attempt to use the rm-dir command on our dir1, it's not going to work. The reason it's not going to work is because there's contents inside of our dir1 directory because we have files located underneath it. So how can I remove it? Well, I want to remove it recursively. To do that, I'll do an rm-rf and then my directory name. So it will go through and it will remove all of the subfiles and subdirectories all the way throughout its entire tree and then remove the parent directory dir1. We do an ls, and we notice now that it's gone. So the rm-dir command only allows us to remove directories if they're empty. We also can use, again, the move command. Let's just create a new file, touch file 1. We use the move command to rename files, not only directories, but files. I can now name that file 2. mv file 1, mv file 2. Now, let's go ahead and create another directory. Make directory dir1. Let's say that I want to move file 2 into directory 1. How would I do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move file 2, this is my source file, into directory 1. If I do my tree command, I see that it has in fact been moved underneath directory 1. We see the file isn't here, and it's actually located inside of directory 1. Now, let's go ahead and go inside of our directory 1. Inside of here, let's go ahead and move and rename our file. So we want to move file 2. I want to move it back one directory into its parent directory, and then I'm going to name it back file 1 again. So if we go back into our parent directory, we've actually renamed it. So I can specify the destination. When I specify the destination, I can specify the file name. The same thing with directories. So let's go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to touch dir1, and I'm going to create file 1 inside of dir1. You see that we've just created the file in there. Now let's try to remove the directory dir1, and I'm going to move it into /home/user into dir2. Now if I do an ls in my home user dir2 directory, you see that our file exists and so does dir2. So let's go ahead and navigate into our etc directory. Let's say there's a few files I want to copy over to my root directory just for backup purposes. So maybe I want to copy, I don't know, let's say that we want to copy our cron.weekly. So I can do a cp cron.weekly. Now, the question is do you think this is going to work or is it not going to work? We're going to go ahead and specify the /home/user location and move it into. I'm not going to specify a name. So do you think this is going to work or not going to work? It's not going to work. Why is that? Well, we can't do it unless we say recursively copy everything inside of the cron directory, the cron.weekly directory, over to our home/user. So if we issue that command and perform an ls in our /home/user, we now see that we have cron.weekly. I can now also see, all right, what's inside of our cron.weekly directory? And there's nothing in there. But if I do an ls on our cron.weekly directory inside of our etc directory, there's not going to be anything in there either. So let's go ahead and move another directory. Let's move our grub.d directory. I'm going to do a cp. We're not going to move it, let's copy it. So let's cp-r grub.d, and I'm going to move it into the /home/user directory. Now I want to make sure this knows I'm copying over the folder. So I'm going to go ahead and do a slash. Now if I do an ls in the /home/user directory, we see that we have grub.d. Let's go ahead and do an ls in the grub.d directory, and it also moved all of the contents inside of our grub directory that's also inside of our etc directory. So now grub exists in two locations, or the grub.d directory does. So let's go ahead and go back into our /home/user directory. Now since I'm in the same directory as grub.d, I can specify move grub.d, and I'm going to move that, and I'm just going to rename it grub.b for the fun of it. And if you notice, I'm able to rename it. We renamed it. Now if I wanted to copy it, I want to copy grub.b. We need to do our -r, so we'll copy grub.b, and I want to copy it into grub.d. So here we've created a copy of it, but we've renamed the copy. So now let's try to move grub.d and rename it at the same time. So I'm going to move grub.d. I'm going to move it into the dir2 directory, and then maybe we specify the name. So let's specify grub.a. Now we'll go into dir2, and we'll see that we now have grub.a. Because my destination, I specified a new name. So we use the mv command to rename files. That is how you rename files in Linux, if you did not know that. So let's get back to removing. Let's talk about removing directories. I want to remove everything that ends in .weekly. So I'll do an rm.weekly. And that should remove it, but it's a directory. So how do we do that again? We need to do a -r for recursive. So it recursively removes it if the directory is not empty. But it's going to ask us to confirm if we want to remove it or not. Well, that would be the same as passing -RI. And one thing I want to show you is if I type alias rm, this is what is happening whenever we type the rm command. An alias is kind of like a shortcut on a desktop. When you type rm, this is really what you're typing. So that's why by default, when we do an rm, it's asking us to prompt, because it's actually saying rm-rfi, because it's already passing the -I flag in there when we're passing the -RFI. Now, if I changed my alias, and the alias is usually set inside of our shell customization files, either inside of bashrc in the etc directory or inside of the profile inside of the etc directory. So I could go ahead and just do an rm-rf, and the force says force it. Don't ask me if I want to do it. So this way, if I'm sure I want to remove it, I can just force it without it asking me. And we can go ahead and just remove anything that ends in .weekly. We'll do an ls. So I want to remove everything that starts with files. I'll do an rm file asterisk. It's going to ask me if I want to remove, since I didn't use a force, each file that has a name on it. So those are gone. I can also remove multiple items at one time. So let's go inside of dir2 and let's create another file. I'll do touch file 2. I can do an rm file 1 and file 2. It's going to ask me to remove both of those. So I can remove multiple files at one time. So that concludes it for this lesson. In this lesson, we learned how to use touch to create directories, how to copy files, remove files, rename files, as well as all of that for directories. We already know how to create text files with either nano or vi. Instead, we just learned about the touch command, which also allows us to do it. So that concludes it for this lesson. Go ahead and complete this lesson and move on.